Lofty words, wrote the 15th century Christian monk Thomas Kempis. Lofty words do not make a man just or holy, but a good life makes him dear to God. I would far rather feel contrition than be able to define it. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Michael Servetus Unitarian Society and our worship together here on this Sunday morning with a sort of cozy group here at the Community Center and those of you joining us online. Our worship here is where we draw on our shared values of mindful interdependence, authentic curiosity, courageous love, committing ourselves to living out a mission of celebrating an actively examined faith, challenging one another with loving kindness to be our best selves and to work for a flourishing world. It is, as always, good to come together in faith and hope, sometimes in a little fear, but always to be together. I have a few announcements for you. One, we will not be gathering here next week. Church next week is online. We will be joining the UU Valley, I believe, down in Bloomington. I am sure you are welcome to go there in person, or you can join online. The link will be in the Thursday update, and I think the address will be in there too if you want to go and join them in person. In 2 weeks from yesterday is the big backyard bash at Bruce and Marie's. Bring food, bring talent. That will be our coffee house for the month. So we will start gathering around 3?
2 o'clock we'll open up.
2 o'clock, start gathering, hang out, bring food, have dinner, and then after people have had a chance to eat, the stage will be opened for people to perform. You can let me know or let Bruce know if you'd like to perform, and we'll get you on the list.
I could add one thing.
You may.
We are also inviting Pilgrim House to join us because we've been working with them a lot. So I'm hoping if you know people from Pilgrim House, please talk to them, invite them.
Wanted to make a quick announcement. Yeah, I'll do this here instead of in the offering. Each month, part of our offering, part of our collection can be directed to a partner organization. This month, in July, it is for Hope Dental, and next month it will be for collecting backpacks for the Fridley schools. Look to the Thursday update. Lori is going to put a little more detail about both of those organizations in an article for that this week, but just be aware that part of what we do is reach beyond these walls and this time that we join together to be part of the world, to build a beloved community beyond these walls. And so part of who we are is that donation, and you can go and select it on the website. We've got it all nicely set up by people better with tech than I am, so that you can say, I would like this money to go specifically to whoever our partner is for that month.
Chad, does that also mean that today's collection goes to that for July?
I don't know.
Yeah, but we mark it such on our.
Okay. Then I am also told that today's collection will be going to Hope Dental. Unless, if you want to mark it as something is going specifically to your pledge, certainly do that. But otherwise, everything that is collected today will go to the Hope Dental, our partnership with them. I do not have other announcements. Anybody else? Anything I'm missing? All right. Well then, let us enter deeper into our worship together as we light our chalice.
And our chalice lighting is an excerpt of the poem Out of the Stars by Robert T. Weston. Out of the stars in their flight, out of the dust of eternity, here have we come. Stardust and sunlight, mingling through time and through space. Out of the stars have we come, up from time. Out of the stars have we come. This is the wonder of time. This is the marvel of space. Out of the stars swung the earth. Life upon earth rose to love. This is the marvel of life, rising to see and to know. Out of your heart, cry wonder. Sing that we live.
Sing that we live, so let us sing together our opening hymn, number 347, Gather the Spirit. The choir will come up and lead everybody, but I think we kind of know it. I guess it is a story. Okay. All right, we're going to have a story without feedback.
All right, so our story for people of all ages today is Love by Sophia by Jim Averbeck and Yasmin Ismail. Some of you may remember this from, I don't know if we've done it in service before. We've done it in online story time, so. Today's assignment, draw something you love, Ms. Paradigm said. Sophia scooped up her crayons. She knew just what she would draw. But when she shared her work with Noodle, oh, you're right, too ordinary. You're right, humdrum. You're right. Better, but still too flat. Ugh. Art is hard. Problem? Asked Ms. Paradigm. It doesn't look right, said Sophia. It doesn't feel real. Maybe you could use a little perspective, said Ms. Paradigm. Perspective? Asked Sophia. What's that? Your paper is flat, but our world is wider, higher, and deeper than that. To make your art feel real, you must see in all these dimensions. Look closely. Closely? Sophia hugged Noodle tightly and gazed up the length of his long, tall neck. Noodle's ossicones look tiny, she thought. But as Noodle bent down for a kiss, his ossicones appeared bigger and bigger. The same thing looks bigger close up, smaller far away, said Sophia. Exactly, said Ms. Paradigm. To a bird flying over Noodle, his head would look huge, but his hooves small. Exactly, said Ms. Paradigm. A bird's eye view. But at his feet, his hooves look huge and his head small. Hey, that's a worm's eye view. What you see depends on where you are looking from, said Sophia. Exactly. That's why when you see from someone else's viewpoint, we say you've gained perspective. But to make great art, you must find a perspective that's all your own. Sophia did. Perfect, she said. Noodle twitched an ear. You're right, Sophia said. This picture belongs on the refrigerator. This was no ordinary claim because this was no ordinary fridge. It was the Whitney, the Guggenheim, the Louvre Museum of all refrigerators. It was also a brand new double-door stainless steel Cool Kitch. Not a scratch, not a dent, not a smidge of sticky tape residue. It would be a tough sell to the selection committee. Uncle Conrad, a politician, and hardest of all, the head curator, Grandmama, who held severe attitudes about art. Sophia approached Mother first. I call this love. May I hang it on the refrigerator, please? This work feels incomplete, Mother said. It's simply a fancy letter O. There are 3 more letters in love. And 100 more ways to look at art, Sophia argued. Hanging it will leave fingerprints, said Mother. I therefore issue an injunction against its display. That's censorship, said Sophia. That's stainless, replied Mother. Sophia looked so sad that Mother showed leniency. Go ask your father. I don't see love, Father said. You're looking at it wrong, said Sophia. Father turned it around and around and around. I'm sorry, he said. Abstract art doesn't hold value. But love is priceless, said Sophia. Not on the free market, said Father. You might have better luck in the public sector. Ask your uncle. Public art is public good, Sophia told Uncle Conrad. I call this piece love. May I hang it on the refrigerator, please? Uncle Conrad convened a blue ribbon panel. After much consideration, they returned their decision. I'm sorry, said Uncle Conrad, but this piece looks like a 0. Are you saying love is nothing? We cannot commit public space to an idea so radical, so avant-garde. That's the wrong point of view. Uncle Conrad shrugged. Mr. Bunn suggests any painting called Love should feature safe, delicious carrots, and he will change his vote if you add some. Never, said Sophia. Sophia was despondent. How can we make them see my perspective? One committee member remained. Sophia and Noodle concocted a plan. Sophia presented her work to Grandmama. I call this piece Love, she said. May I? Art, cried Grandma. A 6-year-old could do this. Sophia refrained from pointing out that a 6-year-old had. Oh, I can't abide abstract art, said Grandmama. Art should express emotion and elevate us. It should look realistic, like something you see every day. I do see this every day, said Sophia. It's a noodle eye view. Elevate her. With that, Noodle swooped down and lifted Grandmama on high. Where, with a little perspective, she finally saw the love. A masterpiece, she told the committee. We are so lucky to have it in the collection. Oh, but I refuse to let this be displayed on the refrigerator. It deserves a place of higher honor.
Audre Lorde, the great poet and activist and teacher, wrote that the sharing of joy, whether physical, emotional, psychic, or intellectual, forms a bridge between the sharers which can be the basis for understanding much of what is not shared between them and lessens the threat of their difference. Each week we take time in the service to make those bridges with the joys and the sorrows, the events that have touched our lives. If you have a joy or a sorrow to share, please, if you are here in the space, Byron will bring you the microphone. Please stand, tell us your name, and briefly share your joy or sorrow. If you have something online, let us know somehow. Jumping up and down, waving, or typing something in the chat will work, and we will share it here with everyone. Are there any joys and sorrows this morning?
I spent yesterday with a good friend of mine who I know has many views that are opposite of mine. And coming to this church is such a safe place to feel the covenant of my beliefs that are on the path. She had a pair of earrings that she had just purchased. And one was a star and one was a crescent. And then she was watching some TV, and so her comment was that she now had Muslim earrings. And I took a deep breath, and I said, well, I think of it as the sun, the moon, and the stars. But she continued to repeat that. She's still my friend and will be my friend, but it does make it difficult in life when you have friends when the outside world is so scary.
I will briefly share that while I was working on the sermon yesterday, so not able to go to the family fun night or family fun afternoon, I got a text from Katie, who was there, but sounds like people were having a very good time and enjoyed some of the slides I had created for at least Yellow Submarine. So I am happy to hear that church happened in a different place, in a different way, and that people were there to have a good time, even if I couldn't be there because I was typing. Are there any other joys or sorrows? Anything online? Nah. Well, Audre Lorde spoke of forming these bridges, and we make them, we create the holy by making these connections, whether it is coming together to sing silly songs with silly slides, or is maintaining friendships and connections with other people who think differently, maybe very differently, and recognizing that there is still humanity there that we have to share. So for those joys and sorrows and challenges, and for all those that have not been shared here today that we hold in our hearts, let us take this moment of silence.
Our first reading is from the Universalist Declaration of Social Principles from 1917. We submit the following working program. Through all the agencies of the church, we shall endeavor to educate and inspire the community and the nation to a keener social consciousness and a truer vision of the kingdom of God on the earth. Democracy, in order to be complete, must be economic and social as well as political. While cooperating to the fullest extent possible with the various forms of charity, relief, and correction, we recognize they do not eradicate fundamental causes. We would mobilize the forces of our church against the causes which create misery, disease, accidents, ignorance, and crime, and summon all our strength to the establishment of justice, education, and social righteousness. The second reading is from Catherine Rundell's essay, Why Adults Should Read Children's Books. When I write for two people, myself, age 12, and myself now, and the book must satisfy two distinct but connected appetites. My 12-year-old self wanted I can't say that word, autonomy, thank you, autonomy, peril, justice, food, and above all, a kind of density of atmosphere into which I could step and be engulfed. My adult self wants all those things, and also acknowledgments of fear, love, failure, of the rat that lives within the human heart. So what I try to write for when I write, failing often but trying, is to put down in as few as words as I can the things that I most urgently and desperately want children to know and adults to remember. Those who write for children are trying to arm them for the life ahead with everything we can find that is true. And perhaps also secretly to arm adults against those necessary compromises and necessary heartbreaks that life involves. To remind them that there are and always will be great sustaining truths to which we can return.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the giving life the shape of wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. So it should have worked. It didn't. But it should have. I was in Aikido class. This was years ago when I was practicing that martial art, and I was working through this technique with a partner. The idea was that when she would take a swing at me, gently, through proper movement and manipulation of her arm and her joints, I could redirect her energy, guide her to the mat, pin her there where she couldn't hurt me or hit me. So we went through it. She punched very slowly at me. I carefully thought through each and every step, each movement in the technique. Step to the side, cup the arm, block the elbow, spin, guide. All of that's going through my head. Nothing is happening in the real world except my partner, who was a black belt, just stood there with her arm extended while I stood there pointlessly trying to guide her to the ground. I was annoyed. I was frustrated. I had thought through every piece of this. It should have worked. It didn't. And finally, she looked at me very patiently and asked, "You're very cerebral, aren't you?" Well, she didn't so much ask as inform. And either way, it wasn't a compliment. I was not going to think my way through this technique. And I wasn't going to get it right until I stopped thinking about it so hard. Not stopped thinking about it completely. Thinking was part of it. Knowing the steps was part of it. But it wasn't enough. Let me try this from another angle. Amy takes voice lessons from Sarah Jane's, a place in northeast Minneapolis. And the other night, they had a casual Friday get-together for adult students where they could just sit down and perform something. Amy played a couple of songs, but this story isn't about her. Sorry. As the name suggests, this casual Friday was pretty casual. Maybe 20 adults in a little bar in northeast Minneapolis taking turns playing or singing, working up the courage and encouraging each other. Now, one of these students was a guy with a violin who he'd been learning to play for just 3 months. And what he played was really just the exercises out of his manual, those early manuals that you get when you start to learn an instrument. I mean, he didn't do anything fancy, but especially considering the fact that he had only been playing for 3 months, it was pretty good. And then his girlfriend or wife, a romantic partner of some kind anyway, sat down at the keyboard and improvised for a little while. I don't even know if she's a student there, but she was certainly welcome, and she was making up this nice little simple song. It was a nice piece, and we all sat and listened as she crafted this new piece of art for us. And then I slowly noticed that the violinist was trying to play along. Again, nothing fancy, just a few notes here and there, something held on the violin, the way that you can as you slowly play that instrument. Something that would just complement the movement that she was playing on the keys. Now, was he getting the notes right? Sometimes. But not always. As many of them were just a titch off key as we're on. Was the sound coming from that bow crossing the strings pure and clear? Not really. Not always. I mean, the violin, to be fair, is not a forgiving instrument. And he's only been playing it for a few months. Frankly, he's better than he has any right to be after a few months. That he could pull this off at all was impressive. But still, it should not have worked. And it absolutely did. Those few notes vibrating through the strings, on, key, and off, wove into the music that was played by a person he loved. And from that little web of sound and music and connections reached out to all of us sitting around this bar, drinks in hand, holding hands, to feel a piece of what it means to be human together. And I looked at my wife and I said, this is church. Music, Aikido, paintings by 6-year-olds and their giraffes. They take thought, but they aren't just thinking arts. There is more to them. There is feeling, there is movement, there is connection, there is meaning, there is mystery. Faith is like that. Religion is like that. Or they can be. Should be. But faith, religion, they're human institutions practiced by human beings, and we're all right. But, well, human beings, we get stuff wrong. Sometimes. A lot. Hopefully we catch ourselves and reevaluate and correct our course. And in the case of religion, sometimes we humans may err too far toward an open and uncritical sense of hope and faith that all will be well if we just hope enough, have faith enough. Or we can tilt the other way, placing our faith too securely in the hands of reason and rationality without the hope, the faith, the mystery. Well, that's the one I want to talk about today, because I'm talking to Unitarian Universalists. And our Unitarian Universalist heritage has deep roots in trusting reason. Sometimes, ironically enough, trusting reason without fully thinking it through. And that may in fact be ironic, but it isn't surprising. And that's because, and I don't know how to break this to us, we're not nearly as smart as we think we are. I mean, sure, we humans are probably unique on this planet anyway. I'm not ruling out hope for beyond. Unique in our ability to form rational thoughts, to be aware of our thinking and its causes, to plan, to reevaluate. But we should not get cocky about that. Just because we have that ability doesn't mean we're always using it. As Stephen Asma and Rami Gabriel explain in their book about the evolution of the human mind, The layer of the brain that we like to think of as our minds, as who we really are, is what makes us special. That's only the thinnest slice of our brain. It is our mind is inescapably tied to deeper emotional and instinctive layers. And that instinct and emotion, Asma and Gabrielle wrote, permeates every thought we think we have. It soaks into it. We can't escape it. We like to think that we rationally take in evidence, form our reactions by analyzing it. But it isn't that simple. Yes, what we perceive guides and shapes our analysis and thinking. But what we perceive and even how we think about those perceptions, all of that is also shaped and constrained by emotional and instinctual reactions to the world and to the people around us that we're not really thinking about most of the time. Look at AI. There's this notion that that's neutral and objective because it's computers. But all AI can do is perceive things that we tell it to perceive. And what it kicks out to us then is going to be based on that. If everything that we have programmed all of these systems to do is rooted in, for example, white supremacy, then AI isn't going to see black people very well. And that's what's happened. We're the same way. We are caught inescapably in kind of a vicious circle. And we don't know we're caught in it unless we take the time to pay attention. Now, there are good evolutionary reasons for all of this that I'm not going to bore you with today. But we need to be aware of it because it affects the way we go through the world. And sometimes it keeps us from being the people we want to be. Let me give you an example from our own Unitarian and Universalist heritage. The first reading this morning was from the Universalist 1917 Declaration of Social Principles. It was a very high-minded document at the time. And what you heard was mostly ideas we would still support today, even if we might phrase things a little differently. Today's views might not speak so much about a kingdom of God on earth as that declaration did, but we do hope to inspire the community and the nation to a keener social consciousness, to mobilize the forces of our church against causes which create misery, disease, accidents, ignorance, and crime. I do think accidents is kind of funny. But, let's see what we can do. To build a democracy that is not merely political, but also social and economic. Now, that declaration, high-minded as it was, is drafted by Reverend Clarence Skinner, a Universalist minister who is one of our tradition's greatest advocates for social justice. Skinner House Books is named for him, our publishing house, or one of our publishing houses. Some of the ways that Reverend Skinner in the 19-teens and 20s anyway, envisioned creating that kingdom on earth were, to deeply understate it, troublesome. Just 2 years before, Reverend Skinner wrote that new scientific thought would lead us to that kingdom. Criminology, he wrote, brings incontrovertible evidence that delinquency finds its roots in congenital defect and preventable neglect. And eugenics holds forth an alluring picture of a perfected race produced through social control of birth. He was a liberal, a legit religious liberal. And he was not alone among religious liberals at the time. He wasn't alone among Unitarians and Universalists. In 1902, the American Unitarian Association published The Blood of the Nation, a study of the decay of races through the survival of the unfit. It was popular for decades. Unitarian minister John Haynes Holmes spoke passionately and powerfully against war. And he also was a minister who encouraged other ministers to be picky about which couples they married so that defectives wouldn't reproduce. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who came from a Unitarian family, his connections to the church as an adult he wrote the Supreme Court opinion upholding a Virginia law that allowed forced sterilizations, concluding that it was a kindness, because this way society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. His words, not mine. Just want to be clear on that. Preachers mailed sermons to contests that were created around the theme of the church's role in improving the human stock, sponsored by the American Eugenics Society. And can we take for a moment, just a moment, to realize there was an American Eugenics Society? That was okay. And in 1928, a Universalist minister from Rochester, just a little south of here, in his submission to one of those contests wrote, "Surely this is a great cause." Were these evil people? They didn't think so. Were they irrational? Again, they didn't think so. They were almost exclusively white, middle to upper class, educated, and they thought they had found the way to improve human life in the rational processes of science. They thought it through. And based on the science of their time, they had a perfectly rational argument. Darwin, at this point, was all the rage. And step by rational step, they were able to reason from Darwin that the best way for a species to survive and to thrive is to encourage breeding by the best and the brightest and restrict reproduction among the pitiable classes. The pitiable classes, of course, were not them. Were not us. And by deciding they could solve humanity's deep-seated problems of inequality, poverty, and hate by weeding out the classes of people who, scientifically speaking, of course, were less evolved. Our well-meaning and liberal-minded forebears didn't have to change much about the way they lived their own lives. The line between rational and rationalize is thin and drawn in an ink so faded we may never see it, especially if we don't look for it. One of the Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams' most quoted lines, and I've quoted it from here many times, is that an unexamined faith is not worth having. Now, he was writing in the years after the Unitarians and Universalists let their faith in reason lead them enthusiastically to eugenics. And I can't help but think that this is part of what he was warning us against. One by one, each member of Sophia's family patiently explained in reasoned and rational terms from their grand experience and education and knowledge as adults, as a judge and a business person and a politician, explained why her painting wasn't art. Wasn't the kind of art, anyway, that deserves the hallowed placement of the family refrigerator. They could see their reasons. They couldn't see the message, the vision in a 6-year-old's picture. Not until a giraffe made them look at it from a new perspective. Sometimes we all need something to help us see that this is what love looks like. And sometimes we need something to help us see that this is what hate looks like, or arrogance. You know, that's part of the reason that I make sure to have a children's story as part of almost every service I lead. I realize none of you are children. I mean, Byron, maybe. But otherwise. But the other reason is Amy's really good at them. But mostly it's because a good children's story, like the story about Sophia, cuts through all those layers of adult knowledge and sophistication and reason and rationality to remind us, as the essay from this morning's reading put it, that there are and always will be great sustaining truths to which we can return. We need those reminders. I mean, of course, we know now that those UUs a century ago were horrifically wrong about eugenics. I mean, many of them, including Clarence Skinner himself, figured that out in their own lifetimes. They came around. But that's not the point. Where are the harmful ideas we've rationalized our way into justifying today? I don't have the answer to that. And the fact that I don't have that answer, that's the point. The point is that we always need to be wondering, is this thing we're doing right and good? Does it match and serve our values? How does it fit mindful interdependence, authentic curiosity, courageous love? How does it help us build a flourishing world, or does it in fact keep us from doing that? Will it make the world a better place for everyone? Or will it just make us feel better about ourselves? Or let us stay comfortable? Reason alone cannot answer that question. It can help. It must help. But it also must be guided by, and it must guide, a sense of faith, of heart, of connection, of humility. This, I believe, is the spiritual discipline of love that should ground a Unitarian Universalist faith and theology. Love that thinks, that challenges, that holds us each to account when, no matter our intent, we make things worse. Love that celebrates the way we make things better and calls us to learn from both those experiences. A love that hopes and a love that never lets us forget that it is not enough to hold hope. We must give it life, or hope is meaningless. There is more love somewhere. That's how I called us to worship this morning with that song. And that love, if it's anywhere, it is here. It can be here, wherever here happens to be. We have the power to call it into our presence. But we can't just think it into being. We must think, we must listen, we must care, we must act, we must allow ourselves to find movement and connection wherever we can. That is love. That is faith. And I think, just maybe, it can work. Amen.